What have we learned? Women want gender equality, better working conditions, and to be recognized for their potential just as men. And that's because women's rights are human rights. The theme for this year's International Women's Day was Women in the Changing World of Work, Planet 50/50 by 2030. But it's better known as Be Bold for Change. A call on women to help forge a better working world, a more inclusive gender equal world. According to the UN Women Executive Director, Mlambo Nguka, we want to construct a different world of work for women. As they grow up, girls must be exposed to a broad range of careers and encouraged to make choices that lead beyond the traditional service and care options to jobs in industry, art, public service, modern agriculture, and science. Women's issues have been tabled before governments and the international community for so long a time that women's rights, it is agreed, are human rights. A message women around the world wanted everyone to hear as they marked the International Women's Day. In the U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C., women used the day to staff off the job and stage a demonstration near the White House. Even classrooms and playgrounds were also empty in parts of the U.S. after thousands of teachers took the day off to join in demonstrations marking the day.
To know that your successes will always be looked as half as good. To know that even on today, there are people who are critiquing women for striking. How dare you? How dare you?
People will say to me, if you were in control of everything in the world, if you ruled the world, what one thing would you do to make the future better? That's an easy answer. The education of girls.
A similar march was held in Poland, where women protested against initiatives by the conservative ruling party to restrict abortion laws. Protesters demanded legal protection against violence directed at women, labeled equality and respect. Among the women was Hollywood actress Jessica Chastain, who was in the country for the screening of her latest film.
I was always planning on striking today, and it was very lucky that I was here in Warsaw to join in solidarity with the Polish women. I'm very happy.
In U.S. neighbor to the south, Mexico, thousands of women marched down Mexico City to demand equality and an end to discrimination. Activists saw the day as one to take stock of the challenges facing the nation. According to the National Citizen Femicide Observatory, 6 women are murdered each day in Mexico, yet only about a quarter of cases were investigated by authorities. Less than 2% led to sentencing. At the UN headquarters in New York, the UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed called the world's attention to the fact that half the world's 244 million migrants and 19.6 million refugees are female. Objectives of the day's event included calling attention to the gender pay gap in which women trail men and regulating reproductive rights.
Just look around at who are sitting in governments and in boardrooms. Do we see equality? Rarely. This is why the Secretary General has been very clear about his commitment to work for gender parity at the United Nations, for justice and for the opportunity of women and girls around the world.
A message the UN Secretary General reiterated in faraway Kenya when he said equal female representation in government and business will guarantee better development, peace and protection of human rights.
The protection of women in these circumstances is absolutely essential. But I believe that the only way to make that protection effective is to give full priority to the empowerment of women.
Celebrated on March 8th every year, The International Women's Day commemorates the movement for women's rights. The earliest observance of the day was on February 28, 1909 in New York, organized by the Socialist Party of America. A demonstration of women textile workers began on March 8, 1917 in the Russian Empire Petrograd, starting the Russian Revolution. The emperor abdicated 7 days later, and the provincial government granted women the right to vote. March 8th was then declared a national holiday in Soviet Russia in 1917. It was not until 1975 that it was adopted by the United Nations as International Women's Day, with a theme each year marking the day since 1996. Before we go on Diplomatic Channel, here are other discussions in diplomatic circles. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte says remarks made by Turkish President Recep Erdogan comparing the Dutch to the Nazis would not help de-escalate a diplomatic row between the two countries. According to Rutte, while the Netherlands did not seek a confrontation with Turkey, it would have to weigh up further options if Turkey did not refrain from such comments.
Of course, we are absolutely willing to de-escalate, but of course these utterings of the President of the Turkish Republic do not help, and they are completely unacceptable. That's clear.
Also referring to clashes between police and pro-Erdogan protesters who gathered outside the Turkish consulate in Rotterdam in protest over his government's decision to ban Turkish ministers from campaigning in the Netherlands on Saturday, Rutte said there had been an initial warning concerning the outcome.
At the same time, we made it clear that we didn't want that to happen. We wanted her to stay away. And this led to havoc and the scenes we have seen yesterday in the center of Rotterdam.
Meanwhile, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has warned that the Netherlands will, quote, pay the price for harming ties after 2 of his ministers were barred.
Brexit central this morning, isn't it?
The UK's Brexit Minister David Davis says the country's parliament must not be able to veto Britain's decision to leave the European Union, urging lawmakers reject proposed changes to legislation that gives Prime Minister Theresa May the power to begin exit talks. Facing a possible rebellion from Conservatives who want to vote on the final Brexit terms, Davis urged lawmakers to back the Prime Minister's strategy and overturn those changes because they would tie the government's hands in the negotiations.
Will be the key.
Before Mrs May can begin negotiations, she must finish passing the legislation that gives her the right to formally notify the EU of Britain's intention to leave and start a 2-year negotiating period as set out in the EU's Lisbon Treaty.
Decision has been made. The British people decided on June 23rd last year to leave the European Union. That is going to happen. My job and the job of the government is to make the terms on which that happens as beneficial as possible.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Finally, Britain's Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson has said the UK would refrain from imposing itself in Israeli-Palestinian negotiations after meeting with Palestinian leaders in the West Bank city of Ramallah. His Palestinian counterpart Riyad al-Malki said he and Johnson held a candid meeting where they discussed how to move forward with the peace process, and Johnson reassured the UK has no intention to impose itself like some got from the machine into the negotiation.
We have leaders, partners on both sides who I think it would be accepted need to come together, and they will have our full support. That's the priority.
We have went through a variety of issues, not only about our expectation from the new administration in Washington and how to engage positively with that, and how to take advantage of what they will offer in terms of moving forward in the peace process.
This is where we end the program this week. Thank you for watching. Leave us a comment at Diplomatic Chan or at Amarachi_Ubani. I'll see you next time.